See, he made it clear. That's what he means. Jesus is the thief in the night. What an ignorant boob! I can't believe this.
And you thought it couldn't get worse than the last one.
Where gun culture meets the gospel. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 46, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. Welcome to the show. We've got a great show for you today. Tips from Mia, tips from Aaron, tips from Sergeant Bill, and we've got a special guest today, Matt and Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast, another member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. They joined us for a fun interview. It's the geekiest interview that you will ever hear, probably until they come on again, here on Armed Lutheran Radio. Stick around, it's going to be a lot of fun right here on Armed Lutheran Radio right after this.
Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
Armed Lutheran Radio comes with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you are not completely satisfied, the next episode is free.
So, how was your Thanksgiving? I hope you had a great time. I hope you were surrounded by loved ones and friends and lots of great food and football. At my house, we ordered a turkey and a ham from a local restaurant. We made a pile of fixins. We had green bean casserole and some cranberry sauce and cream corn and mashed potatoes and a pile of what my daughter used to call doubled eggs. And we pigged out. And then we piled on the couch and watched some football and passed out from all the carbs and tryptophan. It was awesome. I'm not a Black Friday kind of person. To be honest, I'm not a shopping kind of person. Thank goodness for the internet, because if it wasn't for the internet, I'd be wearing the same clothes that were gifted to me for Christmas or birthdays, and I just don't do shopping. Not live and in person anyway. So what did I do for Black Friday? Well, I went to the range, and I took my 6-year-old daughter with me. And we'll talk about the range trip in a future episode. But what I wanted to talk about today was sharing your passion with the next generation. I wanted to get my daughter out to the range and share my love for guns and teach her about shooting for the first time. Now, Sergeant Bill talked about this in a previous Ballistic Minute. Mia's talked about finding the right time to teach your kids about guns. I think that was back in episode 42. A great way to introduce your kids to gun culture is to take them to a gun show. And I've recently begun slowly introducing my daughter to guns. She started to join me for dry fire practice a while back, several months back, and she would come in and she would run the timer for a while, and then later she got a cap gun. We went to Buc-ee's and she got a cap gun, and I took an old holster that I had and wasn't using, and I remolded it to fit her cap gun, and so she would come in there and she would dry fire with me. And she's been asking me for a long time to go with me to a gun show. I piqued her interest with a couple of pieces of info, and she just wanted to come and see it. At the Fort Worth and Dallas gun shows, there's always a table, if not two, that sell toys. You know, the toy guns or wooden, those wooden rubber band guns, cap guns, that kind of thing. Well, that's really all I had to tell my daughter about, but there's more. Food and jewelry. There's always vendors for jerky and nuts and baked goods, and there's usually somebody selling jewelry or homemade decor out of brass casings, that kind of thing. My daughter has been asking to go to a gun show. So when one came up nearby in Louisville, we went. Now, my daughter's kind of wild sometimes. She's impatient and rambunctious. She's 6. And I was worried that she might get bored, that she might cause problems, start complaining, get in people's way, touch stuff that she really doesn't need to touch. I'd never been to the Louisville gun show, and everything I knew prior to this about gun shows in Texas was based on Fort Worth and Dallas and Big Town and Mesquite. And it turned out to be smaller than I expected. Not tiny, certainly not Market Hall in Dallas, but it was smallish. One big room, and that was it. It was in a strip mall, shopping center. Imagine a large department store in sort of a strip mall, and it's a gun show. Well, as I feared, there weren't as many of the vendors that I told her she would expect. You know, there were no toys except for one lady who was selling teddy bears on the side to raise money for her daughter's Girl Scout trip. There were a couple of guys selling drones, I think. There was only one jerky vendor and one booth selling like peanut brittle, and that was it. Other than that, ammo, guns galore. It was fairly crowded. Actually, it was. I'm not sure whether it was really all that crowded. It was just a smaller space. It was the Saturday before the election, so I was kind of concerned that it might be packed because of people out panic buying or whatever. But it really wasn't all that bad. That surprised me, and maybe that should have been my first indicator as to what was coming on Tuesday. But it really wasn't as bad as I thought. It was still, you had to at times kind of maneuver between people. But even so, my daughter had a great time. She loved it. She pointed out the guns that looked like her little cap guns. So every Ruger Vaquero and every Bearcat that she saw, hey, that looks like my gun. She pointed to every pink and purple gun, every pink and purple knife or self-defense tool that she saw. There was one table that was selling self-defense tools for women, so they were all sparkly and pink and purple and, knuckles and combs with hidden blades and pouches to carry pepper spray, and she oohed and awed over all of them. She pointed out every purple or pink gun that was in the entire place and talked about how Mama would love that. I got her a bag of warm candied pecans, a teddy bear from the lady that I mentioned earlier, and a pack of elk jerky. Yes, elk jerky. Who knew? The nice lady at the NRA booth spoke to her and talked to her about her bear. Another one at one of the ammo counters picked with her and tried to trade stuff with her for the bear. She ended up getting a piece of candy out of that exchange. The owner of one of the local gun ranges, a tall gentleman in a Stetson, commented on her sparkly cowboy boots. She never touched anything that she wasn't supposed to. She was patient and well-behaved when I was selling a handgun and buying powder and primers or looking at guns. And she said, "Excuse me," to everybody we squeezed past. Before I did. I was a happy, proud daddy. It was awesome. And afterward, we went out and we had lunch. The media and anti-gun politicians and anti-gun groups, they try to give gun shows a bad name. They talk about this mythical gun show loophole. They suggest that these are places where bad people go and break the law and criminals get their guns. In reality, it's just another place where gun culture happens, where people who love guns come together to buy and sell, to window shop, and to talk to like-minded people. Share that little slice of gun culture with your kids, but don't drag them with you and make it a chore. Don't drag them along while you shop. Make it as much of an experience for them as it is for you. Stop and take time to look at all the things that interest them. The toys, the food, the sparkly guns and girly gear. Even if it doesn't interest you at all, if it interests them, stop and look. Make it a father-son trip, a daddy-daughter date. It's a great opportunity to bond with your kids and to share your passion for guns. Make it a big to-do. Get up, go to the show, make sure that if you're planning on spending some money, you take a wad of cash with you to buy stuff. Set aside some of it to spend on your kids. Make sure that they come out of there with something. I don't care what it is. Whenever I would take my son to gun shows, every time we came home with some sort of memorabilia and a pocket knife. Oh, and jerky, of course. And with my daughter, we came home with treats and a toy, and she had a great time. And when it's done, go and get something to eat. And not fast food. Go sit down in a restaurant, have a meal together, talk about the show, talk about what they saw. What did you like? What was your favorite part? Did you see anything cool? Share that experience even more. Again, you may just be going to the show to see if you can find some primers and powder or some bullets, or maybe you need some ammo, or you want to check out the latest new gun. But if you bring your kids and it's their first gun show, or maybe they haven't been to very many gun shows with you, make it as much about them as it is about you. Let them do some shopping too. There are lots of ways to share your love of guns with your kids. But if you haven't considered it, take your kids to the gun show. Oh, and if it's their first time, you might want to explain the whole gun show thing. See, I guess my daughter was expecting music and dancing because after we'd been there for about an hour, she wanted to know when the show was going to start. Take your kids to the gun show. Have a good time. You'll be glad you did.
It's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. I'm Alan Gottlieb, founder of the Second Amendment Foundation. When someone says we don't need that kind of gun, remind them the Founding Fathers determined what rights our Constitution should protect. There's a world of difference between rights and needs. It is not the function of government to tell us what we need or what we don't. Certainly no one needs an assault rifle or a Saturday night special, or for that matter, no one needs a Corvette with a high-capacity horsepower engine capable of speeds to 150 miles per hour. But in the hands of honest, responsible individuals, we have the right of choice. We have the right to read books others don't like. We have the right to listen to any radio program we choose. We have the right to dress the way we want to. We also have the right to own firearms of our choice. So the next time someone tells you, you don't need something, tell them it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. Join the Second Amendment Foundation today so that this message and our Bill of Rights might live. Call 425-454-7012. That's 425-454-7012.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hi guys, I am out in Colorado pursuing mule deer this week, and today I want to talk to you about how we choose rounds for hunting. They are similar to what we select when we're looking for self-defense ammunition for our handguns. As hunters, we aspire to hunt safely, but also to make clean, ethical shots. When you're shopping for ammunition for your hunting rifle, you need to make sure that you look for a cartridge that's appropriate for your task at hand. Starting with the anatomy of the cartridge, the entire composition of a single one consists of a case, primer, powder, and a projectile. All of that is ammunition. But at the tip, the projectile is called the bullet. And that tip is a key point for big game hunters that they need to look at when they're choosing a round to knock down animals. When we look at bullets, we look at the design, composition, and weight. And there are some which tend to be less expensive, and those are used for practice and shooting matches. These profiles, while they're less expensive, they effectively fly toward targets and can be very accurate. But this alone, it can be appealing to a hunter because you can save some money. But when we're hunting, we need to look at the knockdown power of the bullet, which the match ammunition does not have. As we further examine the projectile, we need to realize that a larger amount of powder in the cartridge combined with a heavier bullet on the tip will provide the kinetic energy needed to penetrate the thick skin and dense muscles and maybe even break bones of a big game animal. And this requirement is why a hunter needs to look for ammunition which contains bullets that are either a heavy lead core surrounded by copper or a poly-tipped expandable copper These projectiles are designed to hit hard and expand upon entry, thus doing the most damage to take down an animal quickly and humanely when it's hit in the vitals. So the weight of the bullet can vary depending on the game species being pursued, and we could go on for days about which caliber is the best, but we're not going to talk about that today. Today I want to talk to you about the projectile. And for an antelope or a white-tailed deer, they're relatively small animals. They have a thin hide, and in comparison to a bull elk or moose, which are large animals with very thick skin, the larger the animal and the thicker the skin, the heavier that projectile the hunter is going to need to have. So as we delve into the weight of the bullet, we can also look at flight paths and that the path that bullet takes as it heads from the barrel to the target. And physics tells you that gravity has a greater effect on an object with more mass. So ammunition companies, they actually provide tables showing the projected data, including velocities and the energies of the bullet, what it's going to attain, plus the flight path. So that's something you can look at in choosing what caliber you want, but it's that bullet that's going to, a heavier bullet's going to fall faster than a lighter bullet, but you also want a heavy bullet to penetrate that skin. So hunters can look at these to determine if the load will suffice for their hunting scenarios. But no matter what you're pursuing, you should always make sure that you are using a bullet that is powerful enough to ethically take down the game you're pursuing. And always head to the range and sight in with the ammunition that you intend to hunt with. And as always, remember, be safe out there. Good luck. Have fun.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
Okay, you have your concealed carry license, but you and I both know that's definitely not training. Do you have the ability to carry your gun comfortably, draw safely, and get at least 2 shots on target quickly? How about shooting on the move, engaging multiple bad guys, and shooting one-handed? These are real-world scenarios you don't get to practice in your concealed carry class or at a public shooting range. If you feel you need to sharpen these types of skills, let me invite you to take the Beyond Concealed Carry training with Bob Main of the Handgun World podcast and Ben Branham of the Modern Self-Protection podcast. Bob and Ben have been training people to defend themselves with a handgun for the past 4 years in cities throughout the United States. Self-Defense Radio Network listeners get a $25 discount off the class tuition and $15 discount on the supporting videos on the Shooters Club website. They might be teaching in a city near you in 2017. Just visit the listener discount page at www.selfdefenseradio.net to sign up and use the password SDRN, that's all lowercase by the way, to get these discounts.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today, I'm going to give you a quick review of something I've been testing for a little while, Magpul Glock magazines. So a couple years ago, Magpul decided to start making Glock magazines, and for the last year or so, I've been trying out some of their full-size 17-round Glock magazines. Now, my first impressions were they were much lighter than a Glock magazine because they don't have the metal liner that a Glock magazine has. And I was worried about them being durable. But knowing the way Magpul, their reputation for their magazines being pretty durable and tough and working really well, I thought I'd give them a shot. So I've been using them in live fire and dry fire. And here's what I found. I'll start out with the pros. Like I said, they're lightweight. They have no steel liner. That could also be a con, but them being lightweight means they're just lighter to carry. They're easy to disassemble and clean, and I mean easy. Everybody who has tried to clean Glock magazines knows what kind of a pain that really is. You either need specialized tools or they're not easy. The Magpul Glock magazines are really, really simple. They're similar to most other metal magazines where you press in a little floor plate detent button and the base plate slides off. That's it. No little tabs on the side locking the base plate in, and it works great. I've been dropping them on hardwood floors, concrete, gravel ranges, and never ever had one of the base plates come flying off. And having used them in both live and dry fire, I've found them extremely reliable. Have not had a single problem with them. They're also pretty rugged. Like I said, I've been beating them up and trying to see what I can get out of them, whether they're going to fall apart or anything like that, and they've been working great. Another pro is they have an orange follower, which is really nice because a Glock follower is black, and the orange follower actually shows you when it needs to be cleaned, because you'll see the carbon building up on that orange follower, and it gets pretty nasty. So as soon as you see that, take it apart, clean it, wipe it down, put it back together, good to go. One of the biggest pros is the price. They are much cheaper than Glock magazines. I'm not going to quote you prices on here, but they are much cheaper than factory Glock magazines. Now, I've only tried out the 17-round capacity mags, but they make a 15-rounder for a Glock 19, 17-round full-size magazines, and then they also make some USPSA-specific magazines because they're the perfect length, 140mm and 170mm, which is a 21-round and a 27-round magazine. So if you shoot USPSA, that's a pretty good round count. They fit in the boxes and all the rules. And if you just want longer magazines, I know I carry a 30-round spare magazine, Glock magazine in my truck. These are a lot cheaper. Those tend to go for some pretty good prices. And the Magpul mags are much cheaper. Okay, on to the cons. I really only have one. They need more witness holes so you can see the number of rounds. Most of them only have 1 or 2 holes, and it shows when you're full. Now, I've seen some videos online where people will drill their own holes so they can, figure out how many rounds they have in there just by looking at it, which is a pretty good idea, but I haven't drilled mine yet. So maybe that's the next project I've got. The only other con I can think of is if you use a big mag well on your gun and you use extended base plates. Now, the extended base plates you buy that will fit Glock magazines are probably not going to fit the Magpul magazines just because of the way they're designed. But you can always get the longer 21-round or 27-round magazines and solve that problem right there. All in all, giving Magpul Glock magazines a big thumbs up. Matter of fact, I just ordered 3 more today. This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and master-class competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
Hi, I'm Paul Lathrop. I'd like to talk with you about the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. As many of you know, you'll likely have to win 2 fights if you have to use your gun in self-defense. The first fight is the gunfight itself. The second fight is the fight to clear your good name through the legal system. You don't need to draw your gun to find yourself in a legal battle for your life and freedom. Even if you do everything right, you may still be prosecuted, which could cost you tens of thousands of dollars. The Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network is an official sponsor of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and they will completely take that worry away by giving you financial assistance and legal assistance if you have to use your gun in a legitimate self-defense situation. In my case, it was $12,500 just to get out of jail and get the attorney started. Don't let an overzealous anti-gun prosecutor make your life miserable because you chose to legally defend yourself. Sign up at armedcitizensnetwork.org for only $135 for the first year and discounted renewals. Or you can call 360-978-5200 and just tell them Paul sent you.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about getting to know your neighbors as a personal defense strategy. Now I know a lot of folks, especially in the gun community, who consider themselves some level of prepper. Now, while that word may have a negative connotation to it with the way that reality shows portray preppers as crazy people with bunkers and basements full of 10,000 cans of SpaghettiOs, prepping really just means to be prepared for bad situations that may happen in life. And it's good to be prepared for those things because they do happen. TV may make you think about being prepared for the zombie apocalypse or a government economic collapse, whatever you want to envision in your imagination, but really, there are other things that are far more likely to happen, such as floods, tornadoes, riots, etc., that we see happening in the news all the time, that it would be good to be prepared for. One thing I hear a lot of people that consider themselves preppers saying is that they plan to bug out or get out of Dodge. They have their bug out bag and they're going to roll out to their compound. Maybe they've got some land out in a rural area and they're going to wait out the disaster out there, and they're going to escape the inner city and move out to where things are safer out in the country, to their compound and that sort of thing. I'm going to submit to you that when you consider the wide array of things that could happen from the context of a worst-case scenario, in almost all of them, that's going to be a less than optimal idea. If you look at communities that have been through natural disasters and survived civil unrest, you find out that it was the communities that banded together as fellow citizens that survived and recovered at a far higher rate than those that did not. Just compare the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath of the tornadoes that devastated Moore, Oklahoma. Now, those are different types of disasters, and you always have to evacuate before a hurricane, but it's what happened afterwards that showed you the strength of the two communities, or the lack thereof. There's still parts of New Orleans that are torn up from the hurricane when, as quickly as a month after the tornadoes in Moore, Oklahoma, you had to squint to be able to see the devastation because people had cleaned it up, because they came together as a community and took care of each other and rebuilt and had that resolve. The reason is because neighbors helped neighbors and leaned on each other and pitched in to make it through that horrible situation in Oklahoma, whereas a lot of the folks in New Orleans were just waiting on the government to step in, or got out of Dodge and never went back, and came to Texas and Oklahoma and neighboring states and never went back to rebuild. Now, obviously, if there's a hurricane and you're told to evacuate, you should do that without hesitation. I'm not telling you to hunker down during a hurricane. That's probably a dumb idea. But even that is going to be you and your neighbors who come together to board up the windows and set up the sandbags, and then you can safely caravan out of town, talking to each other and coordinating and getting out of there in a safe and efficient way because you band together. It's going to be you and your neighbors who then go in and rebuild as soon as the authorities give the all clear. They, by and large, didn't do that after Hurricane Katrina, which is why there's still some devastation there as many years as it's been since then. But in Oklahoma, they did, and it's communities full of neighbors who took care of each other that made the big difference. So what does this mean to you as a person who cares about personal defense and being prepared? Well, I would argue that it's your relationships with the people in your community and your neighbors that are going to increase your survivability in almost any disaster situation that could happen, from tornadoes all the way to the apocalyptical situations. Banding together your resources and hunkering down while things are bad and helping each other rebuild when the tragedy ends, which all these things come to an end regardless of what they are, that's what being in a civil society is all about. And there's still going to be civil society even if the worst case scenario economic collapse comes around, and that society is going to be neighbors taking care of each other just like they always have. And that goes for the more far-fetched situations as well as the natural disasters. Consider this: if you're planning on bugging out, I was in more danger on the road in Iraq than I ever was at my forward operating base. Why was that? Well, on the road, I'm isolated in a smaller element, usually a platoon size or smaller. Think of you and just your family members. And I'm vulnerable and only can survive for as long as the things that I'm carrying on my back will last me. So when I was on the FOB, I could pull together resources from the larger element, mount a bigger defense, have a central resupply point, coordinate all the resources that we had for air support and all that. And on the road, that's where firefights are happening in war zones, because you're vulnerable out there and you only have the things that you're carrying. So if you have some retreat that you plan to get to in a worst-case scenario, some place in the country where you're going to go, you still have to survive the transit to that retreat in order for that to work. And the transit is where you're the most vulnerable and where you're the most likely to be in a bad situation. So I would argue that you're better off in most situations hunkering down and working with the people around you to mount the best defense and to pull your resources to survive. That being said, you can't expect to band together with your neighbors if you don't know them. So if you care about personal defense and survival, go out and make friends with the people that you live around, your neighbors and your community. The same people who you would borrow a cup of sugar from today, or that would borrow one from you, are the same ones who might have the only generator and running water when the grid goes down, if that were to happen. So think about being prepared for a disaster of any sort and understand that it's the communities that come together that survive and rebuild more often than not. So go out, be friendly, and meet your neighbors. And it's not only the right thing to do from a personal defense perspective. Since we're on the Armed Lutheran podcast here, it's also the Christian thing to do as well. So remember that whole "Go ye therefore, Great Commission" command. Embrace it, and we can all survive even the worst situations. And that's your personal defense tip of the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
If you carry a gun for personal protection, it's imperative that you get a good holster. When I started out, I had no idea what that meant, and I went through a bunch of really bad holsters. Then I found Cook's Holsters at cooksholsters.com. Cook's Holsters are custom made to fit your specific firearm. Available in lots of colors, including custom printed Kydex. Cook's Holsters are made in the USA and the great state of Georgia and come with a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and get a 15% discount off everything in the store. You put a lot of time and money into the firearm you choose to carry for personal protection. Carry it in the best holster. cooksholsters.com.
This is Brandon War, host of the Warzone Radio podcast, reminding you that life is a war zone, so it's best to always be armed. First with God's Word, then with a trusty firearm, and by listening to the Armed Lutheran podcast.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. As you know, Armed Lutheran Radio is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and in recent weeks we've introduced you to several of the podcasts in the network, and tonight we're excited to introduce you to another. Now, when you hear the word geek, what comes to mind? Now, if you think of the socially awkward guys like Gilbert from Revenge of the Nerds or Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, you would be dead wrong. Geeks are the cool nerds. They're the nerds with skills. And these geeks love their gadgets, their gear, and their guns. We're joined tonight by Matt and Heinrich, two of the co-hosts from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. Guys, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Thanks for having us, Lloyd.
So, give us a little background. How did you get started? How did you get involved with the network? How did you get... You were telling me this story, Matt, before we started recording about how you met Paul and then sort of how you met the other members of the show.
Well, honestly, for years, I've been a fan of podcasts. I think I started listening to podcasts back in 2006. And I always found it a great way to learn information. So when I finally, in late 2012, decided to become interested in firearms, I decided looking up podcasts. And so one of them I came across was Politics and Guns at the time, now known as Polite Society Podcast. And in mid-2013, Paul was doing live shows at a local, Army surplus store. Well, local's relative, like 90 miles from where I live. One night I decided, hey, I'm going to go up there. And I met Paul, and it was really interesting. He had me on a couple of times. And from that, he actually pushed me into finally starting to podcast. And me and my friend Adam, we'd been talking about it for years. We just never sat down and did it. Mm-hmm. After meeting Paul, he got me pushed into actually doing it. And so me and Adam, we were doing the show for a while because we'd been friends in high school, and we just call each other, talk, and we'd talk this kind of stuff like we do on the show, but just be a phone call. And one day we're like, hey, why don't we make a podcast out of it? Well, finally, after Paul's pushing and inspiring me, yeah, you can do this, yeah, you should do this, we ended up doing it. And we got about 50, I think it was like episode 50 or 51. We brought Heinrich on because in 2015, Paul had Bob Main and Ben Branham up to Sioux Falls to run a local class. Oh. Well, both me and Matt attended the class, and we started talking near the end, and he's like, yeah, I work part-time as a gun designer. He's like, what? Yeah, and so we were doing that. We talked gun designs. I went up to visit their place of work one day, saw some of the prototypes. We've kind of played around with that, but we shot an IDPA match. He came over, we recorded a podcast, and it just flowed. That episode, we called it Robot MMA because it was this week where the U.S. and the Japanese teams had challenged each other to a battle royale from these giant battle mechs.
Yeah, two companies making giant robot things were putting up YouTube videos challenging each other.
And of course, we start talking this like, actually, what would you do? How would you design it? And then we start talking. Somehow we got onto meteors and the Shoemaker-Levy comet strike on Jupiter, the Tunguska strike in Russia. Adam's just sitting over here going, what just happened?
The crazy happened.
Well, it was pure physics. I mean, the two of us on an instinctual level for firearms just click. Adam, me and him, we click on the computer and electronic side. Me and Heinrich, we totally click on the gun side. And then we're all fans of the geek culture. So we all are video game fans, though we don't, any of us really ever have time to play them, no matter how much we really want to. And of course, me and Heinrich, we went beyond that. And we did a couple of things with the podcast, and we brought him on and had him on pretty much every time whenever his schedule allows for it. And it's helped because if Adam can't make it, Heinrich normally can, or vice versa. Or the 1 week I was at Gun Rights Policy Conference, those two covered for me.
Yep. There's pretty much always two of us that are available.
Right. And then we also have the YouTube channel on the side where we're testing out all this stuff that I've been thinking about doing for years, and we're actually getting out and doing it.
So you guys did the you did the tech end of the Gun Rights Policy Conference and upgraded the video and audio, which was very impressive, by the way.
Well, thank you. I ended up building a whole new computer for it. All the cameras we used, that all came from LFD Research, but I was going to build a new gaming computer. I just, all right, we need this to run Gun Rights Policy Conference because the other computers we had access to were either A, not powerful enough, or B, right on the edge of being powerful enough. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to drop the money and I'm going to build this thing out early. So it's partially built, so it's got some old computer parts, some new computer parts, and then I got to mix that and match to actually get it up to where the final spec's going to be. And of course, we future-proofed it, so since we have some 4K cameras, and 99.9% of what we do on our YouTube channel anymore is in 4K. Ooh. For actual image quality, it is fantastic. And for future-proofing, it's fantastic.
Yep.
So we're trying to future-proof it, and we're going to try and start outputting next year. The goal is to try and get GRPC out at 4K.
Now, you guys are in, what part of the country are you two are living in?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm in Nebraska, Heinrich's in Iowa.
Right by the corner of Nebraska and Iowa and South Dakota.
Ah, okay.
So it makes it really interesting when I have to go buy a handgun because there are no good dealers in my state. There's a pawn shop and a guy out of his garage in the immediate area. Everything else is about 60 to 90 miles out. So I have to go buy from a dealer in one state, wait for them to transfer to a dealer in another state, then I can get the handgun. So it normally takes about a week. It's really, really ridiculous considering that we've even had a federal circuit court judge rule that is unconstitutional. It just hasn't been challenged, so it has national application yet.
Right. All right, time for some tough questions. First question, PlayStation or Xbox?
Xbox.
Preferably PC, but since not everybody's going to drop $1,000 on a gaming PC, I gotta have my Xbox so I can play with people like Heinrich who don't have a gaming PC yet. Wink, wink.
Some of us don't have time to maintain a gaming PC because we have young children.
Well, I think of it this way. You can build one, and it'll last you 5-6 years. Maybe you replace the graphics card after 3, and you'll keep going. I mean, my last one I built in 2011, and it's still, with one graphics card update in late 14, it's completely compatible to run all the new VR stuff.
We talked about that today, and it'll probably happen here this year.
So what was you mentioned PC, and what was your first computer? I don't know your ages, so this will tell.
Well, Heinrich is the official oldest on the podcast. Adam is the youngest. I'm the middle one.
You're the middle
child. When this releases, I'll be 28. Yes, I'm the youngin', but my first computer was running Windows 3.1. It was just some computer where my dad bought everything a dollar store had when they went out of business. He got this computer. That was my first computer. Then my first new computer we ever had as a family was a Windows 95 from Compaq with a 333 megahertz processor.
Oh, man. Youngin. Ours was a Radio Shack Tandy 386.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when I was in school, playing with Apple IIes.
Mm-hmm. I remember those. How about your first video game console?
Original Nintendo.
Ooh, nice. Still a classic.
Yeah, I could technically say Pong because my parents still had one, and that's the first thing I really played. But actual console was NES. Got one of those about the time I was 6.
Nice. Another classic. Android or iPhone?
Android.
iPhone.
Mac or PC?
PC.
Both.
Skyrim or Fallout?
Fallout.
Gotcha.
Definitely Fallout, guys.
Yeah. Fallout has guns.
This is true.
And power armor.
This is true. I was going to ask you, Heinrich, because since you work for a firearms company, I often wondered, it's 200 years after the world ends, right? And everybody's using these stupid little pipe rifles. How hard would it be to manufacture guns right out of your garage?
His garage?
Oh,
his super simple.
Not your garage. That's not fair.
Yeah, my garage with the milling machine and metal lathe in it is probably not average.
Yours is the one that everybody's going to run to when the world ends.
Yeah. But with a hand drill and a hacksaw and a couple of files, you can actually make a submachine gun pretty easily.
And we intend to prove that as soon as he gets, his boss is a farmer as well. Mm-hmm. So as soon as they get machine time where we can come in, we plan on building a Home Depot machine gun because they are licensed to build new Title II weapons, so full autos and the like. So we can go in there and build one legally.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. And, of course, be able to show, hey, you can go to Home Depot, you can buy all these parts. It will cost you X amount of money. We're not going to tell you exactly the parts.
Right.
Because we don't want to be accessories to somebody building one of these. But this is what happens in Australia, where you have absurd gun control laws.
Yes, exactly.
People can easily build these.
It's easier to build a full auto than it is to build a semi-auto. So that's what happens.
Very true.
If it's illegal and you're going to get in the same amount of trouble either way, why not go straight to the full auto?
Why limit yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially when most of the full autos you find in building are actually about 400 to 600 rounds per minute, which is the maximum real controllability you have on these things.
All right, last of the tough questions. Glock or 1911?
SIG 320.
Or none of the above.
I'll take all of them. Honestly, I do have the single brand the most Glocks, but that's mainly because it's like, 17, and then I'm playing with RMRs and I'm liking this, and then there's no way to say no to a Glock 42 because as a pocket gun, that thing is just phenomenal. And then it's like, I have one Glock. Let's see, magazines. I can get $15 P mags, or I can pay $45 for this other company. Let's get another Glock.
Let's get another Glock. So I assume you guys have your permits, your carry permits.
Yep.
Okay, so people generally don't just wake up one day and decide, I think I'm going to start carrying a gun today. What motivated you guys to start carrying, to get your permit and to be a concealed carry permit holder?
I just kind of grew into it eventually. So I'd been shooting at least 22s and shotguns on the farm forever, and started listening to gun podcasts and started hearing self-defense stuff. And eventually got to the point where I'll buy this LCP and I'll get my concealed carry permit, and then I started taking it more and more seriously and going to more classes.
Honestly, I kind of grew into it in a very weird way. I really was not anti-gun, but I wasn't a real gung-ho gun guy. I didn't really turn into one until basically 2012, and I started watching some gun YouTube channels, got interested. I bought a shotgun just because it was kind of time. I wanted to buy a handgun, but I found out in Iowa, you have to go get a permit from the sheriff at least a week beforehand before you can buy anything.
Iowa has the purchase permit system?
Yep.
So does Nebraska. Yeah, and honestly, I went to a gun show because I lived across the street from where one was happening. I'm like, most that's going to happen is I got a 10-day wait period before I can pick it up.
Right.
At least that's what my computer nerd person who was just kind of somewhat interested in getting a gun That's why I thought. I get over there and I find out, what about the Second Amendment? The right to keep and bear arms should not be infringed.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out. I got really upset. I'm like, I know the physics of this. This handgun is not all that good. If I'm going for pure energy levels, I want a rifle or a shotgun. So I went out and bought a 12-gauge shotgun with slugs. Just because I got so annoyed, I'm like, I'm going to the far end of the energy spectrum because you guys made me mad.
I'd have gotten a Barrett 50, but I couldn't afford it.
More or less. I mean, let's see. The shotgun I got held 7 rounds of 3-inch slugs.
Oh and you went to slugs. That's awesome.
Yeah, but then I went home after doing that, and I started researching the laws. I'm like, ooh, because I'd been a knife guy. I used to be in this church thing, Frontiersman Camping Fellowship, and I used to have some really big knives from that. And I see, hey, in Iowa, if you get a concealed carry permit, you can carry any size knife you want.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I got interested, but I never got the permit. And then I see, the ironic thing is, Heinrich took the same class from the same people a month before I did for the concealed carry permit. So we've both been carrying about the same amount of time. Yep. I take the class in mid-October 2012, and I submit the paperwork immediately because I'm like, well, if Obama gets reelected, he might do something to try and limit concealed carry permits. And my permit was granted on Election Day 2012.
What a coincidence.
And then I only lived in Iowa for about another 6 months. No, I guess it was about a year from there. So I had the concealed carry permit for a year, and I do all the laws since I'm a trucker, and I spend a lot of time going into Chicago. And I read the laws, I'm like, can I take this with me? I'm like, well, yes. It has to be locked in a safe, not readily accessible, or it must be disassembled and not readily accessible. And you had to have a FOID card at that time because even out-of-state permits were not recognized. I started doing that. Then I moved to Nebraska. As it turns out, Nebraska's got this lovely little law where you cannot apply for a permit unless you've been a resident of the state for 6 months.
6 months.
So even though I bought a house that was...
That's not good enough, buddy.
Yeah, so I ended up going disarmed for 6 months. I'm just like, this is not happy. Especially since once you move out of state, your old permit is not recognized. It's no longer valid. So I couldn't even take anything into Illinois with me. And then finally, when my 6 months are up, I'm like, yay! And I go submit the paperwork, and it takes another month and a half to get back.
Oh.
But Nebraska is one of those stupid states that has a ridiculous thing where the state patrol is in charge of the carry permit system. So in Nebraska, you have to go to a state patrol headquarters in order to submit the paperwork. You have to get fingerprinting done there. So all but one of the state patrol places inside the state of Nebraska, you must make an appointment with beforehand.
Gee whiz.
But you also have to be able to find a notary to notarize you filling out that paperwork and signing it before you can submit it.
Oh, for crying out loud.
That's the kind of laws we're dealing with here, and we can't get them changed. I mean, we also have churches off limits. We have election places off limits. Any school places off limits. Any school function areas off limits. All banks are off limits.
Yep.
Nebraska has this entire wish list of like it's like, yeah, somebody might do something wrong with the gun here, so we're gonna make it illegal for anyone to carry here. It's like, if somebody has a permit and they're going to carry there, they're the kind of people that aren't going to be a problem in a bank or an election site.
And if they are going to be a problem in those places, they're not going to care about your stupid sign.
Yeah, and unfortunately, even though we have this pretty decent state organization where anybody can become a member and it's free to join up, we have this unfortunate thing of a unicameral legislature. So there is no House. There is just the Senate and the governor. And if you can't get the Senate to go along with it, well, you're kind of up the creek.
You're toast.
We have one senator of our state out of the city of Omaha. After, I don't remember which one of the events it was in the last 2 years. He was talking about requiring purchases to purchase tactical clothing.
A background check for tactical clothing?
Yes.
So when I order my 511s from Amazon, would I have to fill out a 4473?
Probably.
Pretty much.
And that was Senator Ernie Chambers. You can look it up. It sounds ridiculous, but he really did that. And do you think that the heartland of America would be free? But we're talking about Iowa and Nebraska here. We don't even have state preemption, and Omaha and Lincoln have done some terrible things to people. If there were anything I would specifically change about the NFOA, it'd be like, hey, do more stuff outside of your forum. And that's one thing that I see is a lot of the problem with some of the gun community. We have a large portion of the gun community who gets insular inside of forums. Not everybody has time for a forum.
We're preaching to the choir.
Right. And that's why we do these things that we do. We try and give another alternative to learn about this stuff, to expand this stuff, to talk about this stuff via podcasts. And it works whenever you have free time to listen.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of new radio shows, almost any radio show anymore, now has a podcast as well as their radio show. I mean, some of them charge for it, like the big names like Rush Limbaugh, but even the Blaze, they put out most of their radio shows as podcasts because it just makes sense.
That's how everyone wants to get their media anymore.
Old people like my father, who's just turning 70 this month, he podcasts. There's no way I'm going to be able to teach him to do that. I finally was able to teach him how to use Touch ID on his iPhone, so it's got a passcode on it now.
Well, if you downloaded the podcast and transcribed it onto a cassette forum.
Something like that. But in all honesty, it goes above his head. He just can't grasp it. I've tried. But for anybody who's younger, I mean, a large portion of at least the gun podcasts, the listenership is about 30 to 65 on average.
Yep.
That's kind of the general area of podcasts for gun side. Now, the tech side skews younger, and that's where we're trying to bridge the gap because we're definitely younger. We are a lot younger than most podcasters out there, but we also have an interesting perspective. We also talk a lot about video games. No real gun podcasts talk about video games.
No.
Yeah.
This will be a first on my show, I can tell you that.
Of course.
Although I will burn 2 hours in the wilds of Skyrim or in the wastelands of Fallout 4 any day.
Ooh.
Love them both.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are good games.
And pretty much everyone does have their own little video game niche they enjoy. They don't talk about it much unless they're actually younger, because that's kind of the media for our generation, where it's less movies and more video games. Granted, there is still a movie. I mean, we talk about movies from time to time on our show, just not as much as we talk about video games or guns.
So you guys were talking about training and taking some classes and competing in IDPA. Tell us a little about that. What kind of classes have you guys taken? You talked about Bob Main's class, and do you shoot IDPA regularly?
I do it a couple of times a year. We did a 3-gun match this year, but honestly, it's either training or YouTube is interfering with most of the matches.
Right.
Trying to think. We got up to that one local USPSA club 3-gun. I've been trying to find an opportunity to get up to one of their USPSA matches, but we're always recording on the days that they're having them.
Oh, actually, I think they do most of their USPSA on Sundays.
If they're doing it on a Sunday, I might be able to get there.
Which is the unfortunate thing, because some of us actually work Sundays.
You'll be on the road.
Otherwise, for training classes, I know in combination, both me and Matt have done the Bob Main and Ben Branham Beyond Concealed Carry. We did a Kathy Jackson course that same year, and then we did this spring Mag 40.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. In that class, I came top shot, and I think Matt came third or fourth. He came in third. And, of course, both of us were using red dot optics.
Yeah. Because Geeks, we have to have the newest toys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because honestly, those things are...
Oh, they're nice.
They are the force multiplier.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing with a handgun, the red dot makes doing that so much easier.
Though I can't say there is a single one that would go, yes, this is the best, go buy it now. They all have their own drawbacks. It's one of those things you need to be
We're at the first
on.
generation.
Yeah,
right.
We really are.
And we did the LHGK medical course last year.
This year, actually. It was in February.
Oh, yeah, I guess it was this year.
It was a trauma medicine class.
Yep.
It was completely worth it. And the one thing that me and Heinrich found out is we hadn't really talked about it before, but as it turns out, Heinrich is an Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
And I was roughly the equivalent through a church program, so it was the Gold Medal of Achievement. We both were that level of scouting, and when we came into the med class, it was kind of reconfirming a lot of what we knew and then building upon that. So
yeah, all that Boy Scout first aid was still valid.
Yeah, and it was just building upon that, being able to get the tricks, get the tips, trying to make you faster and more efficient with what you already knew.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here's the stuff that they taught you in Scouts, and here are the new tools that we have developed over the past 10 years that if you use them the way that Scouts taught you how to, with a couple extra new things, now you're even better at it.
And of course, it was one of those things that also reconfirmed what I'd learned on some podcasts. I built out a medical kit for my everyday carry after an incident that I came into contact with where 4 people were stabbed and I was peripherally on the side of it. So I come in before the cops arrive, but right as the stabber was being subdued. And I'm like, all these people need help and I can't do anything to help them. And there was a guy with, I think, 6 stab wounds to the chest.
Oh, gee.
And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, that guy's holding his shirt on it, keeping pressure in, but there's nothing I can do. And after that, I went out, I started researching more. I finally, through podcasts, decided all the medical gear I was going to carry, and every single thing that was listed in that class was something that I had in my vest on me. And I learned better how to use it and how to implement it quicker and more efficiently than I thought I knew how to do it. And that's because of things like podcasts.
Yep.
They really do help educate you. Even if you're not 100% between podcasts and YouTube, you can get 90% of the way there, but it's still not going to get you those little tips and tricks that somebody who is out every day like an EMT
the
and has treated this stuff.
Yep.
They are the ones that will give you that extra percentage. That's why it's worth it to go train with them.
And it's like it's like our I don't know whether you've heard the segment on my show with Aaron Israel from Fundamental Defense. He talks about and he stresses this in his class. I took his class a couple of weeks ago. He said if you carry a gun and you don't have a trauma kit, you don't have a medical kit in your pocket, you're doing it wrong. You need to think about that first, because first off, you're more likely to have to use that kit than you are to have to use your gun.
Oh yeah, you're in your
Very much
car
true.
and you're likely to come up against some kind of car accident in your lifetime. You need that kit.
All right, so where can listeners find out more about the podcast and more about you guys?
Well, they can check us out at geeksgadgetsandguns.com, or of course we're on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else you can find great podcasts.
But if you want to see our video stuff, you can find all of that over at lfdresearch.com, and that'll link you over to our YouTube channel.
Very good. They are Matt and Heinrich, 2 of the co-hosts of Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on Armed Lutheran Radio. I really appreciate you taking some time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Thank you to all of my contributors, Sergeant Bill Silvia, Aaron Israel, Mia Anstine, and the guys from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns, Matt and Heinrich. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And thank you, dear listener, for tuning in and listening again. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Really appreciate the support. And stick around for another episode next week. Pastor Bennett will be back with another article here on Armed Lutheran Radio. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.